Hey, this is Jamie with Formidable Fabrications, and today I got a new project. So I got a piece of mesh down here. This is the kind of mesh you use for trailer ramps because it has raised lips on it. So unfortunately I don't have the truck here today, but if you look at these pictures here, I had built this truck back end of it probably, I'd probably say somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago for a buddy of mine before I started actually doing welding on a normal professional level. And he needed a dovetail on the back of his truck so he could load up a really heavy zero-turn mower for his lawn care company. So normal zero turns weigh about 1,300. This thing weighed closer to 2,000. And the last set of gates that he had didn't really work out really well. They kept bending, and we kept fixing them. So I built him a new gate, and he wanted something that wouldn't bend. So I built it, and to date, this thing has not bent. It is super, super strong, but with that comes a lot of weight. So he doesn't do lawn service anymore. Now he strictly does like fertilization and aeration kind of stuff, and he uses his truck to haul around his ride-on fertilization spreader, which only weighs, I think it's like 1,000 pounds or so. And this gate's getting heavy. He's getting older, the gate's getting heavier, and the machine's gotten lighter. So needless to say, we need to build him a new gate this year. We're going to keep the dovetail portion of it on because that works out nicely, but we need to make the gate longer. So as you can see on this picture, the gate goes down and hits the ground nicely, and the slope is even with the dovetail, so it's one nice slope up. So recently he got some springs added on the back of his truck, which raised the truck up a little bit and threw off the angle of the ramp. So instead of it being like a nice angle, it was like more tilted. So he actually flipped his stand-on unit over because he was backing it down and it was too steep. So this time we're taking this mesh and we're going to cut it appropriately, and we're going to make a longer ramp so when he backs down it's not as steep and he doesn't risk it getting top heavy on the front of it. So what we're going to do today, need to cut the straps off this thing. This thing needs to get cut in half because I can't store it like this. And then we're going to bring in the other steel and we're going to start making the gate that we can put this mesh on. But in the meantime, let me cut these straps off, get this thing cut, and then I need to cut up this wood because this will be excellent for my fire pit too. So a win-win. So I just cut these roughly about 8 foot just now with a circular saw, because these are going to be roughly like 7.5 foot for the new ramp. But this tubing is kind of heavy, so I got it cut into 8 foot sections. So there's 1, 2, 3. There's going to be 3 ribs in the middle, and then this angle is going to go on the outside. So there'll be 5 ribs across 4.5 foot width. But anyway, the only reason I cut these 8 foot is so I can take them over to the chop saw and get an exact cut on them, because they're too heavy and my lazy butt has not made my new roller table yet for the saw. So I got to hold these up by hand until I decide I feel like doing it. So anyway, let's get these things cut. Gonna take them over to the other side of the truck and get them cut. So it's the next day, and I need to figure out what to put on this end here. So I thought I had some more of this 2x3 steel I was going to put on here, but I don't. But I found this. It's a 2x4 steel, so it's 4 inches by 2, eighth inch thick. So this is going to be perfect for putting on the end of it. And you're probably wondering how this is going to work. Well, so what I've done on other trailer gates is I've cut this edge, and then I've cut this corner down here. So then you end up with a 2x4 piece of bent steel that's that's 1/8 inch thick. All right, so what I'm going to do with this steel, if you can see, so this is the piece of angle that we're going to be left with because we cut the other 2 sides off already. That's going to go in here. It's going to come down here across to touch each one of those. So it's going to give it lateral up and down support. And then we're going to have a 4-inch piece that hangs over that creates a lip that'll rest on the ground when you drive the piece of equipment up. So I've had a lot of success with it. And if we find that this piece starts to bow down at all, we can throw a little gusset under it. But I'm not really worried if it bows down. So if that's straight and it starts to bow down like that, I'm not too worried about it, because at that point it's going to be touching the ground where it needs to touch, and it probably won't bend much more. So let's get this piece cut. I'm going to cut it to length first, and then I'm going to cut it this way, so I'm not cutting as much material, because it is kind of a pain to do, especially when you get down to this corner, because you have to be kind of precise to make sure you get that cut right. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so everything's welded up really nicely, and now I got the mesh on here, just trying to fit it in. So we just got to make sure that it all lines up properly. So you can see it kind of all like lines up with the, actually you can see it better from this angle. As you look down the line, it all kind of lines up pretty well. And then what we do is, this is off center, so it would be easier to line this up with this, but then this divot in here would line up with this divot in here, and it would look weird. So actually I'll show you. So if we line up these edges, and then we weld, and then we put them together. Now granted, it looks seamless, but then you have a really big gap right there. So instead, what we'll do is take this and we'll slide it down. Sorry, not looking good with this, I'm trying to hold this camera and do it. So we're going to line up this, and then down there, hold on one sec, pull this over. Right there. So now when you look down, it looks seamless. Perfectly, I mean, you can still tell there's a line there, but when you, let's see, when you hold it down, you can barely tell any difference. So what we'll do is we'll just tack weld all the little joints. Put a tiny little bead of weld that'll hold it together. And then what I'll do is, I like to weld every single joint right here. A lot of the trailer manufacturers, when they do their gates, they'll weld like here and here and here and here. If you've been watching my channel, you know I hate that stuff. So what I like to do is go through and weld every single one and every single one down here. Because what will happen over time is, if you weld just this one and say this one, when you run something over here and pushes down on this, these will bend. The ones that aren't welded will start to come up, and then over time they'll keep moving and coming up, and they'll break free of the weld. So you'll have this piece right here, you'll have like this much of it welded on, and then these two pieces will start to break off, and you'll have that across the whole thing. You'll have it down the sides especially, and then it'll start doing it in the middle, and then eventually the mesh will completely rip off, or it'll just be held on by a few key spots. So I've never had a gate come back to me with mesh being ripped off, and I can say that as honestly as I'm saying it now. I've never had a gate come back that has had the mesh ripped off, because I weld every single point on here. Is it tedious? Yes. Do I hate doing it? Yes, I hate doing it, but it makes for a great ramp and a great job when it's done. So now all I have left to do is, I'm going to tack this in place, start welding a bunch of these on. Once I get that done, then I can just cut this off where I need to. So I'll probably cut it like right in here, so there's just a little bit on there, and then go down that side. The top and this part are already lined up where they need to be, so I only need to cut off that, but I need to cut off more on this side over here. And once I do that, the ramp is pretty much done, and then it'll be ready to install on the truck, which will be coming here this weekend. So let's get to welding. So that last video was on Friday and today's Monday. And I walked out to the garage and I thought, well, let me get some of this gate done because my plan didn't work out for the weekend for putting this gate on the truck. So I just enjoyed my weekend and said, screw it, I'll deal with this later. But I walked out here, started putting stuff together and thought, crap, I didn't even start filming this, but this might be the most interesting part. So you can see I got a whole contraption here that I made. What I did here, this is how I put hinges on gates. So this is 1 1/4 inch Schedule 40 pipe, and the hinge piece that we have going through is 1 1/4 stock, which is just slightly smaller than the internal diameter of this. This isn't the stock I'm talking about, but the stock I have on the truck currently is what I'm going to use to put in here. I don't have the truck, so I don't have it to put in. So instead I got this piece of pipe. Just standard 3/4 pipe. It's the stuff that that I have my C-clamps with. But anyway, so we have a piece here holding this up. And we have a piece over here holding this up. I got my Fireball clamps holding up this piece of steel, so I know that this hinge piece is level with the top of this. Same over here. This is level with the top of this. Because of the weight, there was a slight dip in this side, so I have another Fireball clamp pushing up on the bottom. So when I put a straight edge on it, it's a little off. I need to hit it just a hair more. But long story short, it's really damn close. I mean, it's only a 1/16 of an inch. So what I need to do, I got to grind these, turn them around, weld them. I have them marked where the springs are going to go. So the springs are about 3 inches wide. So we have 2 springs here, a place for a spring here, and a place for 2 here. Right now his truck, I think, has 4 springs on it, or maybe it's 6, I don't remember. But anyway, we're going to go with 4 springs. There'll be the 2 here and the 2 over there. We're going to start with that. Since this gate is a little longer, there is a little bit more weight further out, but since the gate's skinnier, we cut off a lot of weight on both sides. So we'll have to see how it works out. So I put this little gap in here. Worst case scenario, we can put a 5th spring in, but the only problem we have is last time we put extra springs in his old gate, the gate stood above the ground and you had to step on it to get it down. But once the springs wore out, it would sit on the ground fine, but it's just the few days of having to keep pushing it down. But anyway, let's get this thing grinded so we can get these welded on. And then when the truck gets here, I'm going to cut the old ones off and, oh shit. Okay, so I just had a startling realization. Thank God I noticed this. I have these hinges here, which is great and all, but I didn't account for the hinges on this side of the truck to go in here. All I accounted for was the springs. So I need to move some stuff around. So let's hit this back in a minute after I figure this out. Okay, upon further examination of the situation, I think I got it. So I'm keeping these here. Instead of having 2 that would go here, I'm just having 1 in the center. This one I just didn't take off yet, and this one I'm going to leave the same. So now we have, let me get a tape measure here. So now we have about 14 inches between each of these hinges. Okay, so I got this figured out now. So these ends are staying. I put one in the middle that is 8 inches, which gives me a total of 16 inches for springs and another for the other side of the hinge, which would go here. So there's going to be a hinge that goes out this side, one that goes out this side, one that goes in here, and another one that goes in here, and then the springs will be out here. So each spring is roughly 3.5 inches. So with 16.5 inches, I could put in 3 springs at 9.5, which would still give me 6.5 inches for another hinge, which is, and that's a lot of hinge. So we'll have a hinge here, a 6-inch hinge here, 6-inch here, and then one out here. We'll have a hinge here. We'll have room for 2 springs on each side with the option to put one closer in the center if needed. So while I cut this, I ground this down because I had to take this little apparatus apart. But yeah, so now we need to get these welded in, these 3, and then at some point we need to flip it over and weld the back side of it. But I also need to paint this thing too, which is going to be a hassle because now I have to get all in between these little things and get this black crap out of here. So we'll see how that turns out. All right, well, let's get to welding. Okay, so it's been a few days since I finished up this gate, and we were supposed to be putting the gate on that weekend, so I was kind of hurrying up to build the gate. But then my buddy called me and said that his brakes on his truck were bad and he couldn't make it over, so it's at the shop right now. So instead of waiting to post a full video, I'll just break it up into 2 parts. But as far as you can see it here, so here's the gate as it's done. It's going to sit out here for a couple days because I don't have any room in the garage for it. I got so many other projects going on and I got so much coming in and out of the garage, but nothing is like finished. So it's like impossible to post videos of this stuff because everything just keeps getting delayed. So stay tuned. As soon as the truck comes back from the shop, we'll be installing this. So I know this one definitely isn't as heavy as the one that's on the truck now that you saw in the pictures. So, but it is a hell of a lot longer. So we'll just kind of have to see how it all works out. So I'm excited to see how this is going to fit on and how it's going to feel when we lift it up with no springs. And then once we add some springs to it for assistance, this thing should be a whole different ball game. So stay tuned for the next video. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. It'll be really cool to see how I could take something old that I've built like 15 years ago and modify it without really rebuilding it, just because of the simplicity that I built it with, if that makes any sense at all. Anyway, catch me on the next one, and be sure to check out my Instagram for more regular updates on the projects I'm doing. And just be sure to like, subscribe, and throw down a comment if you want, and I'll see you on the next one.